Marilyn Monroe was the world's greatest sex symbol.
You see her on screen, and there's a light that you're just happy when you see her.
I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind that Marilyn Monroe is going to outlive us all.
This beach where we're sitting in now is Zuma Beach. It is super iconic because this is exactly where Marilyn had her first shoot, and really the starting point of her career, I feel, as Marilyn Monroe.
This is the place where Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio had their first date together.
I'm standing on the corner of Lexington and 52nd, and this is the location of the most famous Marilyn moment of all time.
She was a glamorous star, but I think her legend really grew after her death.
There is not a definitive explanation as to how she died.
Why did she die? How did she die? But we do know that Marilyn Monroe took her last breath on this earth, on this site. It happened right here.
For every celebrity icon, there were places where life-changing events happened, events that shaped and impacted who they became. For Marilyn Monroe, it was the Los Angeles Orphanage Home Society, Zuma Beach in Malibu, California, an inconspicuous subway grate in Midtown Manhattan, the small town of Hemet, California, and the first and only home the legendary star would ever own, the place where she took her final breath on August 4th, 1962. Marilyn Monroe's life began the same way that it ended, in turmoil. She's born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1st, 1926 in Los Angeles. Her mother, Gladys Baker, is a deeply troubled woman. At the time of Norma Jean's birth, Gladys had been separated from her second husband, Martin. And due to her dalliances with other men, it's not clear who the baby's biological father is. Like her future star daughter, Gladys dreams of a career on the silver screen. But it wasn't to be. It soon becomes apparent that something is seriously wrong with Norma Jean's sole guardian. Dr. Lois Banner is a professor of history and gender studies at USC and a celebrated biographer of Monroe.
Marilyn's mother, Gladys, had a bad mental breakdown when Marilyn was 7 years old. She was admitted to the local state mental institution and diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic.
Joanne Linkhorst is the president of the Friends of Rockhaven, a mental health facility in Glendale, California, where Gladys lived for 14 years.
Marilyn Monroe's mother, Gladys, is a very interesting case because she did not have a mild mental or nervous disorder. She is one of the few that had an actual diagnosis of being mentally disabled. And it is believed that she was bipolar. She was definitely paranoid schizophrenic. Gladys couldn't be nurturing as a mother. She was too lost in her own psychosis to be able to really care for her.
Her mother's mental illness would haunt Marilyn for the rest of her life. With her mother institutionalized and no father to turn to, Norma Jean is now an orphan. She shuffled back and forth between different foster families and the home of family friend Grace Goddard. Elizabeth Winder is the author of Marilyn in Manhattan, Her Year of Joy.
Marilyn Monroe's childhood was full of instability, fear, and neglect. She went from foster home to foster home. Her memories of this are absolutely heartbreaking.
It confused her extraordinarily. She stopped talking, and she stuttered, and she was extremely shy.
In September 1935, 9-year-old Norma Jean, shy and unwanted, is placed into the care of the Los Angeles Orphanage Home Society, now known as the Hollygrove Uplift Family Services.
She hated the orphanage. She detested it.
Marilyn never forgot about her early days in orphanages. She would tell terrible stories about there being cardboard birthday cakes full of dust and not enough to eat and bullying and all kinds of things.
We are on the second floor of Hollygrove. This is the original building where Marilyn lived when she was here, and she was here for 2 years, approximately. We think this was her room when she was at Hollygrove. Maybe it was larger when she lived here. It's pretty small, but she would probably be in a group of 10, 12 children.
But Norma Jean doesn't fit in with the other children at the orphanage. Feeling unwanted and unaccepted fuels her ambition for something more.
This is the only room in Hollygrove from which you can see the water tower of Paramount Studios. And Marilyn would lie in her bed at night, and she would look at the water tower, and she would fantasize that she was going to be a Hollywood star.
Norma Jean spends the better part of 2 years at the orphanage. She's eventually released into the care of her mother's friend, Grace Goddard, who would become her legal guardian. Over the next few years, Norma Jean is once again shuffled around Los Angeles, from the Goddard residence to various foster families, every new move making her feel more inadequate and unloved. But things were about to change. The shy, awkward girl turns into a beautiful young woman. When Norma Jean hits high school, she starts attracting the attention of boys. For the first time in her life, she feels accepted and wanted, but her emerging self-confidence is concerning to her mother's friends.
They were really worried about Marilyn. Marilyn was very beautiful and very busty, and the boys were all after her. And she dated a lot, and her guardians thought that she was having sex, and they were very worried that, like her mother, she would become pregnant without being married.
Even worse for Norma Jean, her guardian, Grace Goddard, was planning to move out of state. Not knowing what to do with the troubled teen in her care, she encourages Norma Jean to marry their neighbor's son, a 21-year-old named Jim Doherty.
Doherty had been high school athlete, president of the student body, head of the football team. He'd been a star in high school.
So she married a guy who she kind of knew. He lived somewhere around the neighborhood, and she basically became a child bride.
But for the just-turned 16-year-old Norma Jean, the life of a housewife does not bring happiness. Actress and model Trisha Paytas is a social media sensation whose persona is heavily influenced by Marilyn Monroe.
She got married young. She was kind of married off by her aunt to him. Like, you need to marry him. He has money. He'll take care of you. And I think she was definitely in a loveless marriage.
But life was about to get a whole lot more interesting for the unhappy wife. The United States had entered World War II, and Jim Doherty was deployed to the Pacific. Norma Jean takes a job on the home front at the Radioplane Munitions Factory in Van Nuys, California, where she soon catches the eye of an Army photographer who suggests a photo shoot with her for the Army magazine Stars and Stripes. Norma Jean loves her first taste of the spotlight, and despite the misgivings of her husband Jim, quits her job at the factory and embarks on a modeling career. And her first paid modeling gig took place here at Zuma Beach in Malibu, California.
The photos of Marilyn taken at this beach are by far my favorite because it is so innocent. It's not manufactured, it's imperfect. She doesn't have the perfect weight, the perfect body in these pictures. She doesn't have the perfect nose. She's not the iconic beauty that we know today. And there's something really kind of just refreshing because you can still see her happiness and her drive and her ambition that she had in life.
Norma Jean soon finds herself in high demand as a model.
Marilyn began a career as a model. She was a pinup model. Pinups were very major in the late 1930s and the 40s. She never was a clothing model on runways because her breasts were too big. She couldn't fit into the clothing, and they didn't want breasts showing. And so she became a pinup model.
But as soon as Norma Jean's modeling career starts to take off, problems with her husband Jim begin to fester. He's not happy with the type of attention her new job is getting and wants her to quit. But for Norma Jean, the choice is easy. She continues to model while her marriage falls apart. She appears on 33 magazine covers over the next 2 years. But it's one photo shoot in particular where Norma Jean takes the first step towards transforming into the iconic Marilyn Monroe that we all know today.
She had curly brown hair, kinky brown hair. She is modeling for a shampoo advertisement, and the company wants her to go blonde. She tries to resist it, but she goes ahead and has her hair dyed blonde.
Norma Jean loves her new look, but her transformation into Marilyn Monroe had just begun. Over the next few years, she reaches new heights of stardom and meets and marries one of the most famous athletes in the world.
This is the place where Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio had their first date together.
And Marilyn, the movie star, leaves Hollywood behind, looking to reinvent herself at a legendary New York acting school.
When Marilyn first entered the studio, she was kind of walking into an atmosphere of suspicion and even a little hostility.
For every performer, there were places where life-changing events happened, events that shaped and impacted who they became. For Marilyn Monroe, those places were in and around her hometown of Los Angeles. As a young child, the future movie star was put in the care of the Los Angeles Orphans Home Society. In her teens, the awkward orphan blossomed and began her professional modeling career at a photo shoot on Zuma Beach in Malibu. But her new career takes a toll on her personal life. She separates from her first husband, Jim Doherty, in 1946 after 4 years of marriage. Determined to leave her old life behind, Norma Jean begins her transformation into Hollywood icon Marilyn Monroe. She dyes her hair blonde and sets her sights on a career on the silver screen.
Ever since Marilyn was a little girl, since she was 5 years old, she dreamed of being an actress. She always wanted it from her earliest conscious memories. And in a way, she was always working towards it.
Marilyn had envisioned her career as being a model first. Models were being hired in Hollywood, and she learned pretty early on that she was a brilliant model, and she thought she could translate that to the screen, but she had no guarantee that she would be able to act on screen.
A friend helps Norma Jean get a screen test with Ben Lyon, the head of casting at 20th Century Fox. He's won over by her charm and charisma, but asks for one significant change.
When Marilyn was being looked at by Fox Studios, the name Norma Jean Doherty, they didn't like it. The name Marilyn Monroe came because Ben Lyon, who was the person interviewing her, he had had a romance with Marilyn Miller, a great star on Broadway. So he gave her the name Marilyn, and Monroe is the last name of a lot of women in her family.
And just like that, Marilyn Monroe, the legend, is born. Fox puts her on contract, and she starts taking acting lessons and lands a few small roles. But Marilyn is willing to do anything to achieve superstardom. 93-year-old Ray Rusty Straight is a former Hollywood publicist. He remembers the lengths that some people went to succeed in Hollywood.
I think Marilyn Monroe slept with people because the glamorous women, the men want them. And if you'll go to bed with me, I'll make you a star, or I'll give you a part. You'd be amazed how many stars, male and female, that go on the couch to get a role.
She was definitely a promiscuous girl and got ahead by like sleeping with people. People love to slut shame today, but back then, I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Marilyn's tactics pay off. Her star begins to rise, and she appears in the hit films The Asphalt Jungle and Love Nest. It's not long before she becomes Hollywood's newest it girl.
I feel like with Marilyn, you see her on screen and there's a light. There's a light that you're just happy when you see her. And I think that's a huge thing. She could be a bimbo and a dumb blonde and a gold digger, but you still loved her, which I feel like no one else can like pull that off.
But just as Marilyn Monroe is becoming a household name, she starts to feel all the trappings of fame. She turns to pharmaceutical drugs to meet the demands of her schedule.
It was a very hard schedule. She was taking barbiturates to calm down and then amphetamines to wake up. The problem with those drugs is that they can become addictive.
Little by little, Marilyn Monroe's life is beginning to mirror that of her mother, Gladys.
Marilyn was always afraid that she would lose her mind like her mother did. That fear of losing control and losing her mind absolutely fed into her anxiety.
And her fear of turning into her troubled mother, Gladys, leads Marilyn to neglect her. Word soon gets out that she's let her mother languish in a rundown Los Angeles mental health facility. To avoid a publicity nightmare, Marilyn arranges to move her ailing mother to a more upscale institution, Rockhaven Sanitarium. This tiny room was Gladys's home for almost 15 years. And although Rockhaven is no longer operational, the site stands as a living museum to a bygone era.
For Marilyn Monroe, she knew that this was the best place that her mother could be. It was Gladys's friend, Grace, who found it, but Marilyn paid for it and knew that her mother was very well taken care of.
But despite the nicer living arrangements, Gladys's famous daughter never visits her.
The owner swears that Marilyn never came to visit her mother here. In a way, it makes sense to me that Marilyn wouldn't come and visit her mother. Her mother really was psychotic, and there wasn't much of an opportunity to be able to make a connection with her.
Her mother's illness and institutionalization would haunt Monroe for the rest of her short life. Marilyn's love life is also complicated. Since her divorce from Jim Doherty in 1946, she had dated a who's who of Hollywood royalty. But her next serious relationship would come from a very different world: baseball.
In the early 50s, Joe DiMaggio saw pictures of Marilyn Monroe and was completely smitten, and he insisted to be set up on a date with her.
And on March 8, 1952, Marilyn Monroe reluctantly agrees to have dinner with the recently retired baseball star at this legendary West Hollywood restaurant, the Villanova, now known as the Rainbow Bar and Grill.
This is the place where Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio had their first date together. It wasn't called the Rainbow when she was here. It was still called the Villanova restaurant. She was vaguely aware of him, didn't want to meet him, had a thing against athletes and jocks, and she showed up 2 hours late for this blind date. And over the course of that evening, she was sort of won over by his quiet nature. He's not what she expected. She expected kind of a boisterous, aggressive athlete, and that wasn't Joe DiMaggio. And they spent the rest of the night after leaving, having dinner here, driving around Los Angeles for a couple of hours, getting to know each other. So the seeds for their relationship were planted right here in this restaurant.
After a nearly 2-year courtship, the famous couple tied the knot in Joe DiMaggio's hometown of San Francisco on January 14, 1954. To avoid media scrutiny, they choose to marry here at San Francisco City Hall. Ellen Schumer is the building's historian.
The ceremony that they had was private, but the coverage became earth-shattering because all of a sudden a baseball great was marrying a movie star.
The romance that thrills the world. The marriage of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio attracts a record crowd to the San Francisco court where the ceremony is performed. Two top-flight performers living up to long-established reputations as outstanding drawing cards. Congratulations in which all movie lovers and baseball fans join.
This is the room where Joe DiMaggio married Marilyn Monroe January 14th, 1954.
Monroe would fondly remember the ceremony at San Francisco City Hall as one of the happiest moments of her life. The celebrity couple's nuptials raised her profile even higher. But their relationship soon unravels during a legendary film shoot on the streets of Manhattan.
I'm standing on the corner of Lexington and 52nd, and this is the location of the most famous Marilyn moment of all time. Her husband, Joe DiMaggio, was getting angrier and angrier.
And the movie star heads out on an odyssey to find her birth father in a small town in Southern California.
Marilyn used to come and park across the street here on the other side of Menlo in a limousine and wait to watch her father go home for lunch.
By the mid-1950s, Marilyn Monroe had achieved the near impossible. She had become the biggest movie star in Hollywood. But it wasn't easy. As a young child, she was put in the care of the Los Angeles Orphanage Home Society. After Marilyn hit movie stardom, she fell in love with baseball great Joe DiMaggio at what is now the Rainbow Bar and Grill in Los Angeles. They married 2 years later at San Francisco City Hall. But it's not long before Marilyn's fairy tale marriage begins to unravel.
Very quickly after they married, it became clear what married life to DiMaggio was going to look like. Him sitting in front of the TV, staring at it, not even really interacting with Marilyn except sexually, and that was one aspect of their relationship that was always pretty great. But Marilyn wanted more than that, and that led to the cracks in the relationship.
And like Marilyn's first husband, DiMaggio is controlling and jealous of his wife's sex symbol status.
Joe DiMaggio always had, from the very beginning, he would have detectives following her. He didn't trust her, and he was wise not to trust her. She had affairs. From the time she married him, she was still having affairs with other men.
It's a shocking turning point for Marilyn Monroe. the shy orphan, hurt by everyone she's known and loved, has turned from victim to victimizer.
Hollywood has a tendency to take nice people and turn them into monsters. And then they build up the ego so much, and they're not ready for all that ego and all that celebrity and all that adoration.
She could be charming, utterly charming, if she wanted you to like her. But in her marriages, she eventually became horrible because that was another side of her.
Marilyn's marital woes came to a head during the making of the film The 7-Year Itch on September 15th, 1954. On this New York City subway grate, Marilyn Monroe would simultaneously cement her legendary status and destroy her marriage to Joe DiMaggio.
I'm standing on the corner of Lexington and 52nd, and this is the location of the most famous Marilyn moment of all time, where her white halter dress blew up over her face, standing over the subway grate. Everyone knows this image. It's a very, very sexy image. It's dynamic. She's smiling. Her dress is blowing up over her face. She wore 2 pairs of underwear, one right over the other. But that didn't seem to appease her husband, Joe DiMaggio, who was standing in the crowd getting angrier and angrier. He saw the cameras. Many of the photographers were beginning to point their cameras up her skirt, which Marilyn had explicitly told them not to, and Marilyn became increasingly uncomfortable with the situation.
After the shoot, an enraged Joe DiMaggio confronts his wife in her Manhattan hotel room.
He feels cuckolded. He feels like his masculinity is being destroyed by all these other men, and he hits her. She then really becomes disillusioned with him. And so that fall, she files for divorce.
Marilyn is devastated at the dissolution of her second marriage. And to add to her stress, she's becoming more and more dejected about the dumb blonde roles that 20th Century Fox continues to push on her.
Marilyn never saw herself as a star. She saw herself as an actress and an artist.
While trying to change her public image from ditzy blonde to serious actress, Marilyn becomes aware of method acting, taught by the notoriously demanding teacher Lee Strasberg at the prestigious Actors Studio on 39th Street in Manhattan.
The Actors Studio was founded by Elia Kazan, the great director. Elia Kazan brought in as head Lee Strasberg, and he was teaching the theories of Stanislavski. And Stanislavski believed you go deep into yourself to create a character.
Marilyn makes it her mission to become Lee Strasberg's student. And in 1955, she abandons Hollywood and secretly moves to New York to convince Strasberg to take her under his wing.
She left her studio in the lurch. They had no idea where she was, and she fled LA under the cover of darkness, quite literally, in a black wig and a man's trench coat and sunglasses, traveling under the name of Zelda Zonk.
After much convincing, Strasberg finally agrees. Stephen Bruce is the owner of the famed New York City restaurant Serendipity 3, a place Marilyn Monroe frequented during her time in New York. He remembers how excited she was to be accepted into Lee Strasberg's inner circle.
This table right here belonged to the sexiest movie star alive, Marilyn Monroe. She came here constantly with her coach while she was learning how to be a serious actress. I think Marilyn was very excited to be called a serious actress. She wanted to refresh her career, and she wanted new roles. She was tired of being the sexy diva. She wanted something more.
Marilyn spent several months under Strasberg's tutelage.
I think the biggest gift that Lee Strasberg gave Marilyn was he told her that her vulnerability was her strength. Her sensitivity was her strength. Even her fear and anxiety was her strength. And he sort of taught her to kind of lean into that.
Friends would later remark that it was the happiest time of Marilyn Monroe's life. During her time in New York, Marilyn becomes romantically involved with the famous playwright Arthur Miller.
In the early and mid-1950s, particularly in New York City, the playwright Arthur Miller was kind of a heartthrob rock star.
Marilyn fell deeply in love with Arthur Miller. He was brilliant, and Marilyn loved his intellect. She also found him to be very attractive.
Despite their 11-year age difference, the unlikely couple get married on June 29th, 1956.
She really liked older men because of their knowledge, because of their security, because they know life. And she does call them usually daddy or papa.
These glamour queens, they're always marrying older men because they are looking for the security of a father. Look, Arthur Miller, DiMaggio, they were all older than her.
I definitely think Marilyn had daddy issues. When you don't have a father figure in your life, you're obviously going to look at men for a validation and acceptance, especially older men.
Marilyn Monroe is haunted about the identity of her biological father. Her mother, Gladys, had always been evasive about who her father actually was. Undeterred, Marilyn sets out on a quest to find him. She asks her mother's friends for help, and soon a name is put forward. A dairy farmer living in Hemet, California, about 80 miles southeast of Los Angeles. His name is Stanley Gifford.
Marilyn believed that a man named Stan Gifford was her biological father. He owned a dairy here. I believe that Stanley Gifford was her biological father because Marilyn's mother, Gladys, had relationships besides with her husband.
Rusty Straight's knowledge about the possible identity of Marilyn's father is well-founded. After leaving Hollywood, he settled in Hemet, where Gifford lived and died. Rusty recalls hearing stories about Marilyn coming to Hemet in hopes of reconciling with the man she thought was her father.
Marilyn came out here to see her father twice that I know of. I do know from someone who's lived here a long time that had seen her there. Marilyn used to come and park across the street here on the other side of Menlo in a limousine and wait to watch her father go home for lunch. She did not want to be seen. She hid in the back seat of a limousine. And she brought binoculars with her so that she got a good close-up of her father.
But Marilyn's reunion with Stanley Gifford was not to be.
Stanley didn't want to see her, and that's what Stanley said himself.
Stan didn't want anybody to know that Marilyn was his daughter because he was a very private man and did not like the publicity. I don't think that Stan Gifford gave one hoot about celebrity. He just wanted to have his cows and his wife, and that was it.
It was on his deathbed that Stanley Gifford said that he was Marilyn's father. But by that point, she'd given up on him.
Rejected by the man she believed to be her father, Marilyn Monroe's feelings of sadness deepened. It would lead the former orphan on a quest for a place to call home, and she finds it in the upscale Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles.
You know, this was where she was finally finding some permanence, you know, some real sense of life, putting some roots down.
But tragically, only a few years later, she would die alone, a fallen star, suffering from a haze of mental illness and drug addiction.
What were Marilyn Monroe's last moments really like? Why did she die? How did she die? But we do know that Marilyn Monroe took her last breath on this earth, on this site. It happened right here.
For every performer, there were places where life-changing events happened, events that shaped and impacted who they became. For Marilyn Monroe, they can be found from coast to coast. Her childhood years spent at the Los Angeles Orphans Home Society stoked her dreams of superstardom, which led to her first professional modeling job on the beaches of Malibu. And she cemented her legendary status on a subway grade in Manhattan. But on August 5th, 1962, the world was shocked when Marilyn Monroe's lifeless body was discovered inside her Brentwood home, behind these gates. But what were the events that led up to the death of one of the silver screen's greatest icons? Just a few years before her death, in 1959, Marilyn Monroe is at the peak of her film career. She's finally shed her ditzy blonde persona and is being heralded for her acting skills.
Reviewers were actually calling her an artist for the first time.
But off camera, the 33-year-old star's personal life is in crisis. Her third marriage, to playwright Arthur Miller, is in shambles.
For all of Arthur Miller's compassion and sensitivity and perceptive qualities, he had some negative qualities too. He could be very self-important, very pedantic, and he treated Marilyn a little bit like a child.
He was very controlling from what is said, very controlling, and I think he kind of escalated her with medications and stuff, which kind of took her to like this whole other level.
The couple's marital woes are further inflamed by Marilyn's drug use and her conflicted feelings about wanting to start a family.
Marilyn would say, I don't want to have any children because what if they go crazy, like me one day?
Marilyn was afraid of going crazy all her life.
Marilyn's fears are not unfounded. Like her institutionalized mother Gladys, the movie star was struggling with an undiagnosed psychological condition.
Marilyn suffered from a form of manic depressive disorder in which one goes up and down on a daily basis. If you have it really bad, it can lead to thoughts of suicide.
Marilyn's own declining mental condition is beginning to affect her career. She often arrives late to set, if she arrives at all, and it's affecting her on-screen performances. Her later films are box office disappointments, and it seems that her once promising film career is on the downslide.
This was a lot of pressure on her, and she began to doubt herself. And at the time, she was seeing a psychoanalyst who sensed that Marilyn was almost kind of in danger. And she immediately recommended that Marilyn check herself into the Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic.
And in a plot twist worthy of a Hollywood film, the shy orphan, who against all odds became the biggest star in the world, can't escape her own destiny. Like her mother Gladys, Marilyn is institutionalized for mental illness in New York City in 1961.
And this ended up being a disaster. It was the worst place on earth for Marilyn. She had no privacy, no autonomy, no way to talk to anyone. And it was a scary, demoralizing experience.
And she tries to break down the window in her room, and then they start restraining her, and she can't stand being restrained.
But Marilyn finds an unlikely ally. Since their divorce in 1956, she had kept in contact with her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio.
Marilyn and DiMaggio, even after she divorced him, they remained friends. Eventually, she calls Joe DiMaggio, and he flies up to New York, goes to the psychiatric ward, and threatens to take it apart block by block if they don't let her out.
Monroe is released from the clinic, but is traumatized by her experience, possibly irreparably. And it appears that no one can stop her from continuing on a path of self-destruction. Since her split from third husband Arthur Miller in early 1961, Marilyn has had numerous affairs with powerful and important men. But few knew just how reckless she was. Sometime in 1961, Marilyn Monroe allegedly becomes involved with the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy.
The rumors about JFK are not rumors, they're completely true. There's so much evidence that they were involved.
Rumors begin to spread about Monroe's connection to the handsome young president. And on May 19, 1962, just 3 months before her death, the troubled star would leave little doubt when she struts onto the stage at the president's birthday party at Madison Square Garden in New York City.
At Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1962, she sang "Happy Birthday" to the president.
That moment, to me, is a moment that really stands out as an example of the paradox of Marilyn Monroe. On one hand, she's beautiful. She's wearing an amazing dress. Her hair looks so good. But at the same time, it's a very, very dark moment because she's on so many drugs. She was incredibly vulnerable, like a raw, exposed nerve.
Dorothy Kilgallen, the reporter, said the next day that Marilyn was making love to JFK in front of an audience of 4 million people. She should have known better.
Marilyn's brash display becomes an iconic moment in the star's rich legacy, but it embarrasses the president, so he cuts ties with her.
He dropped her after that, but then what happened was that he passed her on to Bobby Kennedy.
But this alleged relationship, like the one with his brother JFK, wouldn't last. Marilyn finds herself alone again, a place all too familiar for the troubled star. But then she does something unexpected. After living in dozens of different homes and apartments, she finally purchases a home of her own. It's a secluded Spanish colonial bungalow located behind tall gates at the end of a cul-de-sac in the upscale Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles.
You know, this was where she was finally finding some permanence, you know, some real sense of life, putting some roots down.
It's ironic and kind of sad, in my opinion, that the only time in her life she actually bought a house was in Brentwood in California. And it's always going to be a sad house because that's where she ended up dying.
But Marilyn wouldn't have much time to enjoy her home.
The last few weeks of Marilyn Monroe's life were incredibly heartbreaking and dark.
The once popular star had been fired from 20th Century Fox for missing too many days of filming. And in a state of despair, she holes herself up in her Brentwood home. On August 4th, 1962, Marilyn begins her day like every other, drowning her sorrows in copious amounts of alcohol.
Marilyn Monroe spent her last day in her Brentwood home very much alone. She started drinking champagne in the morning, and she was pretty much alone aside from her housekeeper, Eunice Murray.
Sometime during her last day alive, Marilyn's doctor, Ralph Greenson, makes a house call. He delivers a package, one that many believe would ultimately kill the 36-year-old star. It's a sedative called chloral hydrate, which is used to treat insomnia. The scene is now set for one of the most shocking deaths in Hollywood history.
What were Marilyn Monroe's last moments really like? Why did she die? How did she die? But we do know that Marilyn Monroe took her last breath on this earth, on this site. It happened right here on 5th Helena Drive.
It's the evening of August 4th, 1962, and troubled movie star Marilyn Monroe is alone in her Brentwood home. She's recently been fired from her studio, 20th Century Fox, and is at a low point, professionally and personally. Like her mother Gladys, Marilyn has been struggling with mental illness. And to cope with the pressures of fame, she has become addicted to prescription medication. Earlier in the day, her doctor, Ralph Greenson, delivered a powerful sedative, chloral hydrate, to help Monroe sleep.
It's kind of a knockout drug. It's the last resort for people with insomnia who can get absolutely no relief.
Around 3 a.m., Marilyn's live-in housekeeper Eunice Murray wakes up and notices that her famous employer's bedroom light is on. Worried, Murray goes to check on her but finds the door locked. She calls out to her and repeatedly bangs on the door, but to no avail. In a panic, Eunice Murray calls Dr. Greenson. When he arrives at the residence, he smashes the bedroom window and enters. He finds Marilyn face down in her bed, clutching a telephone receiver, with an empty pill bottle at her side. At 6 a.m. on August 5th, 1962, one of the most beloved Hollywood icons of all time is pronounced dead. Her death shocks the world.
The reaction to her death was very staggering worldwide. She was a worldwide star. People mourned, they honored her, they did tributes to her.
When Marilyn Monroe died, her friends were devastated, and I think almost experienced some sort of feeling of guilt. Marilyn has given us so much, has given the world so much, and we couldn't support her. You know, we just took and took and took from her. And I think that that is the sentiment that many people who knew her shared.
On August 8th, the star is laid to rest in a private ceremony at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery.
Only her close friends were admitted to the actual funeral itself, but 4,000 people came to her funeral. They stood all over Westwood, crowding the streets.
On August 17th, 1962, the coroner's office releases their findings. Her cause of death is due to acute barbiturate poisoning. Since there were no signs of external trauma on her body, they rule her death a suicide.
I personally believe Marilyn accidentally killed herself. I don't know if she necessarily wanted to take herself out of this world. I think she just wanted to be happy in this world.
But many aren't convinced that the movie star would take her own life.
It's hard to think she would have killed herself because they were going to reinstate her at Fox. The Strasbergs wanted her back at the Actors Studio. So she had so many new opportunities that they didn't have definitive evidence that she had committed suicide.
In the years after Monroe's death, rumors begin to circulate that the beloved movie star might have been murdered. Rusty Straight claims he's heard audio tapes from former CIA agent Fred Otash. Before Marilyn's death, Otash says he was hired to bug the troubled movie star's Brentwood home in an effort to protect John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert.
I listened to 11 hours of tapes, and it was not just Kennedy with Monroe, but it was both Kennedy boys all over in different situations. As a matter of fact, the last day of her life, Robert was at the house.
Marilyn Monroe, by all accounts, was involved first with JFK, but then had a real relationship with his brother, Bobby Kennedy. People in these homes see him walk by. Ladies are having a parlor card game. One of them sees Bobby Kennedy pass by the window, presumably walking right here, and they supposedly have an argument in this house. What took place?
She felt she was being pushed aside, and she knew a lot of things because presidents are men and they talk to the romantic people. And it's very easy when you're having a relationship with somebody to spill your guts, and she did, and she threatened to do it publicly.
The most prevalent conspiracy theory is that Marilyn Monroe was murdered in a plot to expose or protect her romantic ties to the powerful politicians.
In my opinion, Marilyn was murdered. She was doped up and smothered with a pillow.
But this conspiracy theory can't be proven because the alleged audio tapes tying the Kennedys to Marilyn Monroe have conveniently vanished. And in the 1980s, authorities reopened the investigation into Monroe's death, but found no evidence of foul play. In 1984, Marilyn's mentally ill mother Gladys passed away after spending almost all of her adult life in institutions like Rockhaven Sanitarium. Ironically, the woman who herself dreamed of a Hollywood career never approved of her own daughter's superstardom. As a sad epitaph, Marilyn died without ever attaining the love and approval she desperately sought her whole life. But in the 60-plus years since her death, Monroe's legacy has only grown.
I think she lives forever as an icon because she was the first of her kind. She had that spark that you can't really recreate these days.
In a sense, she never grew old. We never saw her as an old woman. That's part of the reason that she's remained so fixed in her memory.
I think Marilyn Monroe captivates people for a lot of reasons. I think the fact that she was in control of herself at a time where a lot of women in the star system weren't.
I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind that Marilyn Monroe is going to outlive us all. She's going to last the test of time. And I hope that she lasts the test of time as a symbol of hope, as a symbol of passion, as a symbol of artistry, as a symbol of ambition and sensitivity and vulnerability.
And the locations that helped shape Marilyn Monroe's career are symbols of her incredible legacy. The Los Angeles Orphans Home Society, where she looked out the window and dreamt of becoming an actress, which led to her first professional photo shoot on the beaches of Malibu. And those photos helped her become a star and eventually fall in love with Joe DiMaggio after their blind date at the Villanova restaurant, now known as the famous Rainbow Bar and Grill. Marilyn Monroe's tumultuous Hollywood career led her on a quest for recognition at the Actors Studio in New York and reconciliation in the small town of Hemet, California. And after a lifetime of professional triumphs and personal struggles, she purchased her first home, where she would tragically die alone.
So why did you come here?
To see the house of Marilyn because my girlfriend is a fan of Marilyn, and it's really amazing to see you.
She was right here, you know what I mean? That's what I think about. If we stood here back then, we would have seen her walk right out, right here, you know?
Yeah.